My 14-year-old daughter, standing in my kitchen in Goldsboro, North Carolina, asserted that her stepfather was a more manly figure than I would ever be. She spoke loudly enough for the neighbors to likely hear through the window screen, not whispering or slipping up. It was clear and forceful, as teenagers often say things to ensure maximum impact. She declared I was a failure, and she wished her stepfather were her real father. In response, I remained calm, neither shouting nor weeping, despite her departure towards her mother's car. Instead, in my kitchen clutching a dish towel, I made a decision that would alter everything. I granted my daughter precisely what she requested, and within 24 hours, Diane was calling me with the same panic I hadn't heard since our marriage dissolved. Prior to recounting the events that followed, let me clarify something about my background, for the narrative lacks coherence without it. My name is Eugene Halbert, and I am 44 years old. For the past 16 years, I have been a pediatric nurse at Wayne UNC Healthcare in Goldsboro, North Carolina. I have supported children as they went into surgery, spent late hours with worried parents, shared unpalatable truths when needed, and even missed personal events due to my professional obligations. There was always a young patient requiring my attention over holidays, weekends, or nights when my daughter called for me at school plays. I share this not to boast about heroism, but to provide context. I share this with you as the tale your child may have spun about you, the narrative Diane had carefully crafted for years, bears no resemblance to reality. If this tale resonates deeply with you, having perhaps experienced the harshest aspects of yourself mirrored back by your offspring, please subscribe to this channel, comment below, and click like. You are not isolated in this experience, and what follows in this narrative is crucial for every parent to comprehend. Diane and I tied the knot when we were 26. We welcomed Reese 2 years later. For a few initial years, our marriage thrived as early unions often do, genuine but imperfect. We lived on Elm Street in Goldsboro, shared our lives with a dog named Pepper, and presented a seemingly idyllic existence from an outsider's perspective. However, nursing is not a typical 9-to-5 profession. It never has been, nor will it ever be. Hours are harsh, the psychological strain is overwhelming, and there were prolonged periods where I returned home too drained to fulfill Diane's marital needs adequately. She desired vacations, social gatherings, and a partner who arrived before 8 and still had energy left to spare. In contrast, I longed for rest, relaxation, and a means to bear the work-related burdens without succumbing to them. We didn't argue. That was almost our issue. Instead, we subtly drifted apart in the same marriage. By the time Reese was 7, Diane and I had parted ways. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. We shared custody. Reese would spend the weekdays with Diane and alternate weekends with me, along with summer and holiday periods split between us. I agreed to these conditions because a lawyer once informed me that the parent who concedes less is often the one who loves less. I wasn't certain of it all the time, but I endorsed it due to my faith in Diane as a responsible mother, my hope for Reese's well-being, and my emphasis on stability. However, I erred regarding one of those assumptions. About a year post-divorce, Diane encountered Kyle Forsyth. He was a commercial real estate professional, 43, divorced twice without any biological children. He sported tailored suits and drove a silver Audi, taking Diane to high-end Raleigh eateries that I couldn't afford on my nurse's income without draining my savings. I had no opinion about Kyle Forsyth. He was simply Reese's stepfather. As long as he treated her kindly and respected Diane, he was of no concern to me. What I hadn't foreseen was that Kyle Forsyth would serve as a benchmark. It began subtly. Reese returned from a weekend with her mother and shared that Kyle had taken them to a beach house in Wrightsville Beach. "It was amazing, Dad," she said. You expressed amazement, and she detailed an outstanding resort, an outdoor shower, a rooftop deck, a waterfront seafood restaurant for sunset viewing. At that moment, I was dwelling in a 2-bedroom flat off Berkeley Boulevard, watching the sun set through a window facing another apartment complex. Weeks later, she spoke of Kyle's anniversary surprise to her mom, a Nashville trip secretly arranged by him. I admired it as romantic. She scrutinized me, much like teenagers pondering approval. It turned out my praise wasn't appreciated. The comparisons continued. Kyle had courtside seats at a Hornets game, knew the art of steak cooking, owned a boat. In the conversation, it was mentioned thrice that Kyle's daughter from his first marriage, in her 20s, shared a strong bond with him. I remained silent. I fulfilled my role as a father by being present for every pickup and drop-off, helping with homework when allowed, attending her school talent show 45 minutes away, sitting in the third row and recording the event on my phone. These actions, though unacknowledged or discussed at social gatherings, are the tasks of a father. Yet the narrative being spun in another household portrayed a different story, one where I was allegedly absent, career-focused, and emotionally distant. However, I discovered, indirectly through her teenage conversations, that Diane had been recounting a revised account of our marriage for years. Not blatant lies, but rather subtler distortions. She subtly replaced facts with feelings until the feelings became the perceived truth. Thus, according to their version, I was absent in our marriage. I lacked ambition and settled for less, leading me to drag Diane down with me without any discussion. This was simply the environment Reese lived in daily, and by the age of 13, she was deeply immersed in it. I noticed the transformation. Of course, I recognized it. At ages 10 and 11, Reese would rush to greet me when picked up. She'd eagerly show me things and laugh at my jokes. She'd ask about my work, the children I looked after, and whether working with sick kids was scary. She considered me brave for what I did. By age 13, she stopped rushing to the door. By 14, she barely made eye contact. I convinced myself it was just adolescence. I convinced myself she was adjusting. I told myself the same things many single fathers tell themselves when their daughter distances herself, that it's temporary, normal, and not a sign of what it seems to mean. But then came the Saturday that altered everything. First weekend of October, a chilly and overcast Saturday in Goldsboro, echoing its early autumn charm. Reese was expected to spend the weekend with me, a plan I had meticulously arranged. The agenda was modest, reminiscent of our past, nothing fancy, merely things she once cherished. I procured pizza ingredients for our long-standing tradition that started when she turned 6. A new card game crossed my path, thinking it would appeal to her. Our Sunday morning excursion to the Center Street Farmers Market was on schedule, as per her request in August. 3 in the afternoon rolled around and Reese arrived. The pizza dough was prepared, and I greeted her warmly, expressing joy at her arrival. She settled on the couch, engrossed in her phone. I afforded her privacy, allowing her time to unwind. As minutes passed, I finalized the toppings, beckoning her to the kitchen about 40 minutes later. She ambled in slowly, still fixated on her screen, and mentioned she wasn't particularly hungry. I suggested we could skip making pizza if she wasn't up for it, and asked for her preferences. She set aside her phone, looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, not adolescent moodiness or inattentiveness, but something more resolute, something practiced. "Dad," she said, "I'd like to discuss something." I agreed. We settled at the kitchen table. Kyle proposed funding my school-arranged Europe trip in the spring, a cultural exchange to Italy and Spain. The offer was unexpected. He didn't seem to have given it much thought. I was aware of the trip details. The cost was $4,200. I had saved $300 and planned to take on additional work during winter to cover the rest. "That's a very kind gesture from him," I replied. "He does things like that often," Reese added. "He considers us, he plans ahead." She expressed her wish for me to be more like the person who ensures her well-being. "Why can't you be similar?" she inquired. I maintained my expression. I asked her to clarify her statement. "You're a nurse," she stated, and the way she said it, not maliciously, but with a tone that diminished the importance of the word, made me understand. "You work nights, you're always exhausted, you live in a small apartment, you can't take me anywhere or do anything." Kyle has a proper career, he achieved success. I allowed the words to linger before replying. Then I said, "Reese, are you aware of what I do at work?" She shrugged in response. "I care for ill children, some who are your age and some who are infants. I have been with mothers who were expected to outlive their children, and I have supported them through that. I have held a child's hand during a procedure that scared them, so their parents wouldn't have to witness it and break down. I have done this for 16 years. I selected that job as it holds significance for me." She glanced at the counter. "The pay isn't sufficient for any noteworthy endeavors." "Remarkable," I echoed. "You understand my sentiment." After a brief pause, she spoke. "You're unsuccessful, Dad. Kyle isn't like you. I wish he was my biological father." She voiced it with the same confidence, volume, and directness as earlier, staring at me. I didn't escalate the conversation or weep. Instead, I looked at my daughter for a prolonged moment and murmured calmly, "Understood, Reese." She appeared surprised by my response. "I'll call your mother to retrieve you, and I want you to consider what you said, as I'll respect your wishes." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means I'll give you what you requested." Approximately 20 minutes elapsed, and Diane's car appeared in my parking space. Reese left without a farewell, From the window, I watched her departure. Diane didn't come to the door. I remained in my kitchen for an extended period with the pizza components spread across the countertop, pondering deeply. Then I formulated 3 resolutions. The initial decision revolved around Reese. I chose not to contact her that night or the following morning. For years, despite a gradually expanding distance, I had been persistently trying to reach out to her through texts, checks, and sharing amusing or intriguing things. That Sunday morning, I ceased this practice. I did not vanish. I did not become harsh or distant in any official sense. I merely stopped pursuing. If Reese wished to communicate with me, she could initiate the contact. If she desired to visit, she could ask. I would no longer implore my own daughter to desire my presence in her life. The second decision concerned Deanne. I contacted my legal representative, a family law attorney named Gary Timmons, who had an office on William Street in Goldsboro. I informed him about the events that had transpired. I informed him that I thought Reese was being swayed by an incorrect narrative about me, one that was fundamentally untrue. I presented him with 16 years of proof in the form of shift records, school records, medical records, text messages, voicemails, and photographs to support my claim. I sought his advice on possible actions. He explained that what I described was called parental alienation. While challenging to prove in court, he said it wasn't impossible, especially with the documentation I had gathered. He pointed out the significance of my meticulous record-keeping over the years. I expressed my intention to carefully review everything and prepare myself, but wanted to hold off on filing anything for now, preferring to observe developments first. Lastly, I acknowledged that I had silently carried a sense of shame regarding my income, my apartment, and my life in general for many years, even though I felt confident about my work. However, it was the subdued, pervasive kind of criticism that seeps in when someone dear continually evaluates and finds you wanting. On that Saturday, I chose to discard that burden. I pondered my life truthfully and candidly. I was a pediatric nurse with 16 years of service. My record was impeccable. I possessed abilities. Over the past 3 years, I had been given an opportunity as a nurse educator at the hospital. It was a role that involved training and supervision, along with a higher salary. Twice I had declined it, unwilling to leave the ward. Yet I contemplated again. This time I phoned the nursing director on Monday morning. Her name was Patricia Dunmore, who had offered me this position on multiple occasions. When I contacted her, she chuckled slightly before greeting me. "Jean," she said, "guess why you're calling?" "I'm ready now," I responded. We met that afternoon. 1. The new job offers an annual salary increase of approximately $18,000, improved working hours, and a potential promotion to the position of education director within 2 years. I finalized the paperwork last Wednesday. It's essential to clarify that this career shift wasn't intended as a response to Reese. It was merely coincidental. My delay in changing jobs stemmed from personal matters no longer relevant, but the circumstances aligned simultaneously, and I won't attempt to sugarcoat it. Exactly 12 days after Reese moved out of my apartment, Diane contacted me. It was a Sunday evening around 7:00 p.m. While reviewing orientation materials for my new job at the kitchen table and eating leftovers, I nearly let her call go to voicemail. Despite our arrangement to communicate only about parenting matters, something compelled me to answer. On that particular call, Diane's voice sounded unusual. I had known her for close to 2 decades, and I had heard her voice in various tones: happy, angry, tired, frightened. What I heard when she uttered my name held echoes of an unfamiliar tone since the evening we received unexpected news in a doctor's office. It was raw, unadorned, and laced with urgency. "Eugene," she said, "there's been a development." I paused mid-bite. Unbeknownst to us, Kyle Forsyth wasn't entirely the person he had portrayed. The events she recounted are in the exact sequence she divulged them, with no embellishments because they speak for themselves. For over a year, Kyle's commercial real estate firm was under scrutiny by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. The investigation centered around deceitful claims made to investors regarding a commercial development project in Wake County, a mixed-use building that had been sold to 4 distinct investment groups using documents exaggerating the property's projected value by a substantial margin. In total, the questionable transactions added up to nearly $1.2 million. The investigation was concluded. 2 weeks prior to Reese labeling me a failure, Kyle was referred to the state attorney general's office with criminal charges being filed. His license was temporarily suspended until resolution. Diane learned about it when a Raleigh News and Observer reporter contacted her on a Sunday afternoon for comment. She hadn't been aware, or had chosen not to acknowledge it. Initially, I believed the former, but still do now. Diane wasn't deceitful. She simply held Kyle in high regard and had consciously avoided considering contradictory evidence. However, there was additional information. Kyle confided in Diane in a near whisper that he had a daughter from his first marriage, a woman named Brittany, aged 27 and residing in Charlotte. Reese, who had met Brittany twice, described her as composed and successful. Brittany had not communicated with her father for 4 years due to a debt issue. Kyle had borrowed money from Brittany when she was 22, money she earned through working 2 jobs during college, which he never repaid. This fact was unknown or unmentioned to both Reese and Diane until Diane called Brittany's number found in Kyle's call log. Upon answering, Brittany bluntly stated, "I don't know why you're calling me. I have nothing to say to anyone associated with my father. He stole from me, we have no relationship, and that will never change." The hardest thing Diane had ever said to Reese was what followed. "Brittany has been in her room for 3 days, barely eating, and won't talk to me." While this conversation took place, Reese was present and heard it all. "You persistently questioned me about why I didn't disclose truths about you. I put down the documents I was holding." "What do you mean by that?" you inquired, questioning if it was accurate that you worked nights to secure our health insurance. Inquiring about your presence at her school events and consistent child support payments since the divorce followed. You questioned all of these, and I answered truthfully to each one. This led to an hour of tears from her. Diane's voice trembled on her last words. "Eugene, I believe she's been told things that weren't fair to you, and I think I was the one who shared them." After a brief pause, I chose my words carefully because I knew this moment would have lasting consequences. "Diane," I said, "I harbor no anger towards you. I won't use this against you. I simply wish to converse with my daughter." The following evening, I went to Diane's house in Berkeley Hills, a neighborhood on the northeast side of Goldsboro. Frequent visits to a well-kept neighborhood house, always confined to the driveway, not venturing inside. For 6 years, I hadn't entered the house, but today Diane stood aside to let me in. In her room was Reese. Diane signaled and said, "Reese, your father is here." A long pause ensued before the door opened. My daughter, smaller than my memory, stood in sweatpants and a hoodie with puffy eyes and a downcast gaze. "Hey, kid," I greeted, to which she didn't respond. Upon asking if I could enter, she moved back. I perched on her desk chair's edge while she sat huddled on her bed with her knees drawn to her chest. A bear plushie, a relic since she was 4 years old, resided on the bed. The brown bear I had procured for her at a gas station during our trip, which she named Biscuit without much explanation, was nestled in her arms. An extended silence ensued before she murmured, "Dad, I said something awful." "You did," I affirmed. "I didn't intend it." "I know you didn't, but you spoke your mind, and we must acknowledge that." She gave a solemn nod, her chin quivering. "May I share something with you?" I asked, to which she gazed back at me. "When you were 3 years old, you developed a high fever of 104 degrees in the dead of night. Your mom was petrified. We rushed to the hospital at 2 in the morning. You were burning up, and you didn't grasp why we were there or why you felt that way, yet you kept asking for me repetitively. 4 hours they let me hold you as tests were run. That night I decided to return to nursing school. Your care displayed the compassion and knowledge needed in such moments. Watching the nurses calmed me, knowing they knew what to do. Money isn't everything, it's about making a difference. I chose this job because its importance surpasses financial gain. Despite not being as lucrative, I'd make the same choice again for you. This decision doesn't mean I don't care about providing for you. Instead, it signifies that my work holds value and I excel at it. Do you comprehend this?" She nodded. "I needed to tell you I am not a failure. Please hear me say this." Reese buried her face, emitting a sound deeper than tears. I shifted from my chair to the bedside, wrapping an arm around her. She molded herself against me as she once did when young, seeking solace in the familiarity that was once her safest refuge amidst a vast world. Time seemed to halt for a while. There's an unspoken struggle in divorced households that is seldom mentioned at the outset, when agreements about holidays and paperwork are being finalized in a mediator's office. Overlooked is the quiet, stealthy conflict that unfolds in subsequent years. Not a war waged with guns or lawyers, but a battle of narratives, a battle of subtle, accumulating impressions. A conflict where the image of you, carried by your child's thoughts, is molded through countless casual remarks, intentional silences, and oversights you may never become aware of. For years, I had been losing this battle without fully realizing the extent of my defeat until the night my daughter stated that Kyle Forsyth was a more manly figure than me. This isn't shared to portray Diane as wicked. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman who had been wounded and had spent years crafting a narrative in which she starred as the heroine. Many of us engage in this behavior. We construct stories that justify our actions. The issue arises when such storytelling occurs within a marriage and with a shared child, as the tale you weave shapes another's entire perception of reality. Reese hadn't been deceived through obvious lies. Instead, she was enveloped by a version of truth that left out everything troublesome. And like children often do, she filled the void with what she was provided. In the time span after our discussion in her room, Reese and I began anew. Not flawlessly, not without obstacles. She was 14 with much to ponder, and there were days when she was completely present and others where she seemed absent altogether. Yet she started reaching out. She initiated conversations, genuine ones, about my occupation, the reality of my daily life, and my past self at her age. I responded truthfully, even addressing the awkward aspects. I disclosed that her mother and I hadn't found contentment in each other, and neither was solely a victim or a villain. I confessed to not communicating as effectively as needed. I admitted to regrets about my actions. However, I also shared the things I had done well. The nights I drove nearly an hour each way for brief events. The additional shifts I worked to ensure her school trips were funded. For years, I had been secretly saving money for her, sufficient to cover 2 years' worth of in-state tuition by the time she turned 18, without dipping into a single cent of financial aid. She was unaware of this savings account. Neither was Diane aware. I had never spoken of it, as it wasn't an action taken to seek recognition. It was something I did out of moral duty. When I disclosed this to Reese, she looked at me for a prolonged period. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked. "Because it wasn't necessary for you to know then. You were young. I wouldn't burden you with future responsibilities. That was my role," I replied. She slowly shook her head, not in disagreement, but as a response to the revelation that something she had long believed was false. In the following March, Kyle Forsyth pleaded no contest to 3 counts of fraudulent misrepresentation. 18-month supervised probation, restitution payment to investors, and permanent prohibition of a North Carolina real estate license were his penalties. Diane ended their relationship following the news story in The Observer, canceling their engagement, which I was unaware of. Apparently, Reese too had only learned about it from an overheard phone call. I wish to clarify that I did not feel satisfaction about this situation. People may expect a divorced father to revel in his new husband's downfall, but I did not. Instead, I felt exhausted. I felt empathy for Diane, who deserved more than what she chose. I felt empathy for Reese, whose worldview was built around a man who turned out to be empty. What I truly felt was clarity, not righteousness or vindication, but clarity. The sensation when something that's been vaguely noticeable for years suddenly becomes crystal clear. For years, I've known, not the details but the outline, that the narrative of my life didn't align with the one circulating about me. Now they coincide. In January, I moved into a house, not a grand one, a 3-bedroom on Royal Avenue in Goldsboro, featuring a spacious porch, a backyard with a fig tree, and a community where neighbors lounged outside during warm evenings. Quite unlike the Audi, the beach house, and the rooftop deck, but genuine mine. Reese assisted me in painting the extra room. She chose the color, a rich green that she claimed resembled the interior of a forest. We spent a Saturday afternoon with rollers, drop cloths, and a playlist she compiled, and at some point during the second wall, she began discussing a boy at her school. A predicament involving her best friend. Intricate social dynamics I didn't fully grasp but listened to attentively. For years, we hadn't conversed as deeply before. I didn't verbally express it, but I absorbed it. In April, Patricia Dunmore confirmed that I was being seriously considered for the Director of Nursing Education role at Wayne UNC. I was to learn the outcome in the fall. Over dinner, I shared this with Reese. We were enjoying tacos at my kitchen table, her legs tucked under her on the chair, just as she had since she was young. She looked up from her plate and whispered earnestly, "Dad, I'm really proud of you." A sentiment I had longed to hear from her for 14 years. Yet it arrived unannounced, nestled in a casual Tuesday evening as if it were the most ordinary thing possible. I thanked her and asked if she needed more salsa. She agreed. I have pondered over what this all means. I've examined it countless times, searching for the lesson, the meaning, the concise conclusion that gives it significance. Life doesn't neatly condense into a concise account. Instead, it's complex and leisurely, often with crucial instances unrecognized until they've passed, leaving us to reflect upon them in retrospect. Here's what I can confirm. I'm a 44-year-old pediatric nurse based in Goldsboro, North Carolina. For the past 16 years, I've assisted children and their parents through some of their most difficult times. I drive a 7-year-old vehicle, reside in a house with a fig tree, and have a savings account that I've meticulously accumulated year by year for my daughter's future. I find deep fulfillment in my profession, a contentment that money can't buy, depreciates not, and doesn't hinge on others' opinions of me. I am not defined by failure. I am an individual shaped by my decisions, and I wouldn't swap any moment or encounter in a pediatric ward for a luxury Audi, a seaside mansion, and a reputation based on illusion. My daughter realizes this now, and as I sit on my porch at Royal Avenue observing the fig tree's light shift, I often reflect upon the night I stood in my kitchen with a dishcloth while my daughter uttered the most hurtful words she ever addressed to me. In that moment, I chose not to quarrel, not to dispute, not to justify myself, and not to chase her down the driveway pleading for understanding. Instead, I granted her wish. I retreated. I allowed her to move towards what she perceived as desire. In time, the reality, irrefutable and evident, behaved like truth often does when it's unimpeded. It manifested. That was not a lesson I grasped that night. My mother imparted a lesson to me when I was 9, during a time when a schoolmate had falsely accused me of something true. Sitting me down at the kitchen table, she said, "Eugene, you can't compel people to the truth. All you can do is embody it so thoroughly that they can't ignore it." Lately, I find myself mulling over this advice. Last Thursday, my daughter contacted me, proposing to visit on Saturday and assist with moving our fig tree due to its deeply established roots. The plan was to shift it to a new spot for better afternoon sunlight. She promised to research the best method for transplanting mature trees to ensure its survival. I agreed, and she arrived promptly at 10, 5 minutes ahead of schedule.